Thank you. Good afternoon. Hope everyone's been having a great week here at WWDC, and there actually have been a few announcements, small ones, about HomeKit, so we'll touch on that briefly also as I go through. Just a little bit about me. I was originally a software developer. I started out in software engineering at Cornell University, and they renamed it since I've been there. It was actually Operations Research Industrial Engineering, but that wasn't sexy, so they named it Information Engineering now. Sounds more computery. And I've worked on both large and small systems. One of the first systems I worked on as an engineer was at Hewlett-Packard. This, in its day, was a windowing user interactive computer. It was built into a desk. It's called the HP 300. It's interesting side note, the code name was Amiga, because it was supposed to be friendly. It had a windowing system and actual buttons on the screen, a precursor of many modern things that we saw later on down the road. And I also worked on some large systems in quality assurance, which unfortunately that stuck with me. This is tandem computers, big super mini computers, really fault tolerant. A little thing called the local area network kind of destroyed their business. When you connect lots of inexpensive computers together, you don't need a very expensive fault-tolerant computer. But I worked in quality assurance, so I worked on the other side, tearing apart software, and that gave me a skill or a curse, if you will, that whenever I pick up something new, I look for the flaws, I look for how it can be improved, how it could be better. And finally, I did some work not as a consultant, but as an employee of a small company, building a messaging system in its day, actually little printers with built-in modems that would be used for answering services. Ladies would sit in a room and transcribe messages, and they'd be modemed over, so the customer would not have to call in to the answering service. Kind of interesting in its day, but the key part of it is it exposed me to the 6502 and actually writing assembly language in the early days when the Apple IIs were available, and quite interesting. I certainly feel today that if I don't know if any of you work in assembly language or work there, but anyone today, if you're using Xcode or any IDE and you're getting frustrated that it took 10 extra seconds to compile or the IntelliSense isn't working right, spend a day doing assembly language again and you'll feel a lot better going back to Xcode and modern languages. It's an interesting experience. Then I shifted over into the marketing side. A lot of different career paths. I went into technical marketing and I worked for a company that made one of the first PC clones. This is Eagle Computer. They're based right here in Los Gatos, and I am local to the Bay Area. We were not famous, but we were infamous for two things. For having a CEO crash his Ferrari the day we went public in the lake. Great story. They said, oh no, he was just coming to the office. He was not there all day drinking champagne, which we knew to be true. They actually reissued the IPO 2 weeks later and went out at a higher price, so go figure. The other thing we were famous for is being the first company to be sued by IBM for copyright infringement of the firmware, the ROM BIOS, basic input-output system. Now, I was a young marketing guy, just been an engineer. I went to my boss, I said, is there really, did we do anything wrong? He looked at me, he said, when the printouts have the same spelling mistakes in the comments as IBM, you might have a problem. They gave the books, at that time IBM published everything in books, they gave it to a secretary and said, type this in. And that's how they started their development of the firmware. Needless to say, they're not around anymore either. But I worked for a startup company that, Castell, we did network fax servers and network print servers. This was in the really early days where networking meant AppleTalk or LocalTalk and Novell. Is anyone familiar with Novell networking? Remember Novell? Proprietary at the time, a derivation of Xerox Ethernet. But again, we did one of the things that nowadays is sexy. We shifted gears. We went from selling a $3,000 box to selling a $500 print server, which was 1/10 of the engineering effort, but everybody liked it. Nowadays, the phrase is pivot. when you screw up and you try to keep your VCs happy and stay in business, you pivot. In those days, we just said we screwed up and we needed to do something to save the company. We did run into a little competitor called Intel that unfortunately bought our competitor, so that was another one. And then lastly, sick of all these little companies and startups, I spent some time at Cisco in the networking arena, and I worked on one of the branch office routers, the Cisco's 2500 series. So a lot of experience in networking and communications. And I actually did a little bit of Apple development, which got me involved again, publish an app just to go through the process and understand the pain of provisioning certificates and all the other sidelines, 4 hours of code and 2 weeks of fighting iTunes Connect in the App Store to actually get it out there. But it was a good learning experience. And so I went on into the indie entrepreneur segment. I did some technology consulting. I actually was a web hosting company for a while, working on virtualization and supporting more advanced applications. But that really brings me to what we're here to talk about today. Coming from the product side, the marketing side, I saw a lot of interest in the technology of smart homes and home integration, but I saw a lot of issues. Wearing my marketing hat, I saw a lot of issues. I had a friend down in the Los Angeles area. They had put in a big system. It was $30,000, and it didn't work. Like any engineer, I looked at it and said, I could do that with an iPad and a little software, and why'd you spend all that money? I can fix it. So through that experience, I got a deeper understanding of the industry, the products available, and what wasn't there. And so as HomeKit has evolved and come out, I really looked at that and said, there's a lot of opportunity here. There's things still needed, but there's a lot we can do. And I want to give you a little bit of an overview of where the traditional home automation systems integrator market has been and where it's going and how that fits with HomeKit. One thing to understand is the market's not new. Smart homes have been around for 30 years. They just cost $500,000. So the only thing that's really changed is the price point, the affordability, and the wider availability of more standards, not one, but more, and bring the price down to where you can see it at your retail stores, the products. It's not only a giant billionaire that owns a mansion that can use this stuff. That's the good news. And products, there are a lot of range of products. I'm sure many of you are familiar with them. The classic hero products with the big brands like a Ring video doorbell, does two-way security, video monitoring, the classic lock, and of course a security camera. I mention this because even today, security is the #1 driving need for smart home and home automation. Many customers don't know what they want, but they want security. They're worried about their neighborhoods, they're worried about criminal element, they're worried about just being away from their homes. They may have 2 homes or 3 homes. Again, coming from the higher end, they may have a ski lodge, they may have a beach house. So they're interested in monitoring and being aware of who's going in and who's going out when they're not home. The next big area was, and still is, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, epitomized by the Nest. Of course, designed by ex-Apple people, so that elegant user interface. It really brought together everything good that we wanted to see in home automation. Easy to use, elegant design, affordable, $200-300 when it first came out, and almost DIY. I mean, there's a little bit of issue with power and batteries and feeding it, but a lot of people can install it themselves. And we've seen the evolution to smart fans. I believe Apple released a profile for air conditioner units, and there's a GE or another unit that is now HomeKit controllable. The third biggest area is lighting automation. Dimmers, switches, lights. Philips Hue with the multicolor bulbs are very popular. But if you look at this picture, the interesting thing is you notice there's no product here. It's a picture of a kitchen or a house. Where it gets interesting is all the hidden lighting, the under-the-counter lights, the ceiling lights dimming and setting the brightness levels. There's actually a lot of engineering or lighting design that goes into setting that, almost like setting a stage. And the more advanced systems a company setting levels and making a lot of things happen all together, not just turning a light on or off. And of course, the classic and probably still the last bastion of the high-end traditional systems integrator product line is the home theater. And this is really the modern living room, family room, but there are still, amazingly, a lot of private residences with an actual movie theater. The sound, the rooms, the acoustical panels, the lighting. They're using industrial projectors, the same as in the actual movie theater. These may be in the homes of producers, record producers, film lovers. The cost is still anywhere from $50,000, $200,000, $500,000. So there's a lot of activity here, but it's under attack from the Apple TV, the over-the-top streaming, and the alternative ways to view content at home. Last but not least, music and audio. We're familiar with, of course, the Amazon Echo, the Sonos multi-room wireless speaker systems, and now Apple with the HomePod. But music and audio by itself is an existing category without the voice control. Just listening to ambient music that's synchronized in all rooms of the house, at the backyard patio, the front yard. There's still a lot of emphasis here also for putting these systems together and making them work flawlessly across more than one room or environment. Now, I think many of us that just get started or just dabble, we're familiar with consumer devices. These are the more typical $50, $100 devices, external plug-in dimmers, as I said, the hue colored lights, the in-wall dimmers, some of the connected outlets, and we're seeing an expansion into power strips, outdoor rated. You don't want to run your Christmas lights. You need an outdoor rated power strip or outdoor secure waterproof safety by the pool. So a lot of activity there. And last but not least, buttons. We all get excited about Siri and voice control, but it's important to not lose sight of the fact that average users, not people here this week, want buttons. They want to walk to the wall, push a button, have a light turn on or off. Telling them, oh, you just take your phone out of your pocket, you go to the app, you find the app, you slide up to Control Center, you go to the Home app, you've lost them. So personally, when I work on systems, I try very hard to use a triple interface. I try to provide the intelligence of the iPhone, the iPad, or other computers, along with physical buttons and along with some voice overlay. The interesting aspect is not just different people use different means of interaction, but the same person may interact differently. If I'm in bed and I don't want to wake my partner, I'll probably want to have a little button that I can push to turn the lights off. If I'm sitting in front of the big screen TV and want to change the channel or see the TV guide, I might want to shout out a command to a voice assistant. So depending on the task and the mode that you're in, you may want one or more user interfaces. And that's something that's often overlooked in product design, that, oh, everyone's just going to use an app on their iPhone, or everyone is only going to push a button and doesn't need an app, or if we do a voice skill, we can ignore everything else. It's really important to do a holistic approach. And lastly, we continue to see new devices come online. Last year, Apple introduced a profile or a device specification for irrigation or sprinklers. We just saw a few weeks ago a hose controller, which is the little box up in the right, and we're still waiting to see some good actual multi-zone water sprinklers. Several have announced, but they haven't shipped. I won't embarrass any names, but it's been a long time coming. But I want to show you more of the bigger picture. Again, in the higher end traditional systems, design, visual design, physical design is very important. So here you see a wall-mounted iPad, which is very popular in larger environments. And to the left of it, you see that little square cut in 4 pieces. That's actually a switch. It's a high-end designer switch, and each button does something based on the integrator or the customer's preference. And to the right are photos of some of the switch panels from high-end traditional systems, Crestron, Crestron, Lutron, Control4. You may see these in hotels, you may see them in larger homes, you see them in the back of the room in hotels or public spaces. But there's still a strong need for switches that tell you what they do. Each switch has an engraved function on it. It's relatively straightforward. And this is an area that's been ignored in HomeKit. You see very few HomeKit physical switches. There are a few, but they're oddball shaped or they're hard to interface. And that's one area we could use more advancement. But that's hardware. So let's talk about interactive controls and user interface. Again, the triple or quadruple interface, if you will, a physical button, a screen device, touch device, perhaps your Apple Watch, and voice control. But interactive control, being able to just make something happen when you want it, is really just the tip of the iceberg. It's fun, it's easy to demonstrate, but it's really not what home automation is all about. Home automation is about automation. And if we look at what some examples are here, this is an app called Home, but it's not by Apple. It actually preceded the Apple Home app. It came out before there was an app. And this app is not easy to use. It's not really end-user oriented, but it exposes more of the automation in HomeKit. It lets you see the services, it lets you see events, it lets you see the actual automations, and you can see more detail. It goes into the same database as HomeKit, but it's more of a tool. I use it as a tool to diagnose and see what's happening under the hood. On the other hand, we have the larger system. This is a product from Control4, one of the established companies. This is their when-then. It's basically their attempt to replicate if this, then that type of easy programming to link actions and conditionals together. And this, you may have seen, this is from a company called Stringify, which is a visual flowchart approach to automation, hooking things up literally with icons that take certain actions. In this example, the location, geofencing, the geofencing symbol, if you're at a certain location and it's a certain time, then take these two actions. And unlike if, the claim to fame of Stringify is multiple actions. So if this, then, and. So a lot more conditional logic. Still a consumer end user oriented capability. This last example is actually from a Mac application that it's called Indigo Domotics. I view it more as a prosumer product. It's too advanced and too confusing for a true end user, but it's not sold and supported into the professional dealer channel. So it's really a high-end homeowner or enthusiast. But this is their visual GUI for basically setting up rules and using a GUI interface into a rules manager, trying to bridge the gap between pure script and pure visual programming flowchart. It's an interesting approach. It's a little bit dated, but it's extremely powerful in that prosumer space. Now, we're familiar at this point with the war going on, or the battle for market share between Amazon, Apple, and Google, but really, that's not the battle we face in the trenches as systems integrators. The battle we face is between this guy, the Apple TV remote, which is not well accepted by consumers, and this guy, which is Comcast Xfinity, and the little, you can't see it there, the little blue microphone button. Interestingly enough, a lot of customers are now saying, I don't want all this other stuff. I want the original cable remote. It works good enough, it's easy enough, it controls the TV directly, it has voice. You can ask for programs, you can ask for the program guide. So we're seeing kind of a back to basics. Simplicity is winning out over complexity in control. And so it's caught a lot of people by surprise. We didn't expect that the cable companies that everyone loves to hate, I mean, when's the last time you liked your cable company or your satellite company? So there's just some challenges here in usability, and certainly HomeKit and Siri have a ways to go to bridge that gap. But if we look at the industry as a whole, these are the three names that were briefly mentioned in the keynote, which was really surprising to our industry. These are the three dinosaurs. These are the guys that will sell you a $50,000 system to turn a light bulb on and off, if you let them. These are the guys that actually won't give you the password. They come in, they install a system, and they don't trust the customer. The customer is the enemy. No, you can't move and put a favorite on your TV controller. You need to call us and we'll charge you $500 to come out there and move an icon around on your touch screen. So this is the disruption that's happening. HomeKit and the other players have tapped into this market, and these guys are running scared. They're probably in their peak right now. They're doing extremely well, but they're on the verge of seeing this mass market of product really cut into their foothold. The difference is the software to provide their experience doesn't yet exist. So they're still, it's like a race car. They're saying, yes, you can buy a little four-wheel car, it'll get you to the store, but you don't have the experience. And these are the guys that are going to attack. In the trade industry, there's a phrase called GAFA, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. We don't know why Facebook is in there. They don't do home automation, but they're one of the big guys. There's actually a secret behind this. This phrase actually originated in the French media. So when they use this phrase, they're actually referring to ugly American companies and cultural resentment of the invasion of our culture into the world. But it's been adopted by the advocates in home automation, saying that these mass market, easy to use, higher quality products are going to attack the dinosaurs. So you may see that phrase used more often. But let's be honest, we need to talk about the limitations of HomeKit. In its current incarceration, one of the biggest problems we run into is when things don't work. The classic no response. All of a sudden, one or more of your devices simply don't respond. Now that's okay, but there's no way to figure it out. There's no diagnostics, there's no logs, error recovery is, the Apple philosophy is it simply works. You don't need to know anything. Falls apart when you have multiple devices, multiple vendors, multiple networking layers. We really need more to know what's going on. Remote access is another interesting area for HomeKit. It runs completely local, which is great for reliability. But if you have an Apple TV or you have an iPad as a hub or you have now a HomePod, you get secure, flawless remote access when it works. When it doesn't work, I mean, I feel like I'm back in the Windows day. What's the Apple advice? Log out of iCloud, log back in again. You know, if I wanted to reboot my computer and go in and out of Windows, I would have stayed with Windows. So we need more in this area. And the big one for me as an integrator and my fellow integrators is configuration management. What I mean by that is the ability to set up a configuration for a client in my lab, in my shop, bring it on site and deploy it. I can't do that. I can't pre-deploy. I can't back up and restore a saved configuration. And when I'm on site, I have to log in under their iCloud. I have to be invited. It's a lot of good things. I mean, I love Apple products. I love the security. I love the ecosystem. But it creates a lot of barriers to the way we like to work and be able to replicate setups and have reliability and have our technicians be able to do it in the field. Now, fortunately, we are seeing the Home app was announced as coming to Mac OS. So we're starting to see some limited support in the Mac, not just in iOS, but we certainly can use a lot more. But what I want to talk about is what I call the Achilles heel. These are areas that I don't expect Apple to address, not because they're technical challenges, but because they go against their philosophy. And these are areas where we, as developers or industry people, can look to fill in and help there. One of the biggest, of course, is there's no web interface. There's no REST API. There's no classic interface. In the integrator world, when all else fails, you fire up a REST API and you can make things talk to other things. So a lot of integration, a lot of hooking systems together you can do with a REST API if you have no other direct integration. The other big area, again, this is a philosophical one, is multi-user support. Apple is primarily one user, one device. A home is not single user. Yes, maybe you're 20 years old and you live in an apartment or you rent a room, but the rest of us, we have homes, we have multiple family members, we have visitors, we may have service people, cleaners, gardeners, repairmen, maintenance people. These are all people that need security access, perhaps temporarily, they need access to entertainment. The babysitter would like to turn on the TV and watch a movie without having to be a rocket scientist to figure out Siri commands or somehow get linked into your iCloud account. So the multi-user aspect is really a key barrier to taking HomeKit into the larger multi-home, multi-room environments where the traditional systems have played. Now this is a big one too, is multi-platform. We're here all week, we see Apple everywhere, but you look at the numbers again, what percentage by unit volume, not dollars, is Android? 80 to 90% of the world is Android by unit volume. Yes, all the profits with Apple, and that's why we're all here. But in the real world, go into most families, the kids get Android phones because they're cheap and they break them and you can throw them away and buy another one for 50 bucks. A visitor, I mean, your college buddy, your football buddy, your NBA finals watching buddy, they come over, they're Android. You're going to tell them, no, sorry, you can't turn the lights on, you can't turn the TV off, and you can't adjust the volume. Well, actually, that may be a good idea in some cases. But so this is really what holds HomeKit back from being accepted and deployed in a wider audience. Hotel rooms. There's a development here of condos where the builder is building in HomeKit. Well, actually, they're not building HomeKit. It's on the price list. You can buy shades, you can buy rugs, and you can buy HomeKit. So I went over there, and I said, I played dumb. I said, I want to see the smart home, and the salesperson said, oh, you want to see the Apple apartments? So right away, they cut out a large of their potential audience by saying, no, this is not for you unless you're Apple. So I think this is a challenge, and this is an opportunity because, as I said, by Achilles' heels, it's less likely that Apple's going to build a solution to support other platforms. Now, maybe they'll build some hooks eventually with web interface or on the Mac that allow things, but they're not going to go in this direction. It's probably a good bet that they're not anxious. They won't put iMessage on Android, so it's highly doubtful that they put Home App or HomeKit on Android. And lastly, I hinted about this earlier, the user interface. Right now in HomeKit, we basically have an interactive button interface. Apple's design is okay. It's not their best user interface design, but we don't have interfaces that are application specific, market specific, or task specific. And I'll go into that a little bit further. So as developers or product people, what are some of the things we can look at? Well, I think it's important to just go ahead and I break it down as a triple E: embrace, embellish, and extend. So embrace HomeKit. That means Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. There are other hardware technologies, Z-Wave, Zigbee, but really, if you're on the Apple train, don't swim upstream. Focus your energy on Wi-Fi and Bluetooth because that's what Apple has certified and that's what Apple has embraced. Embellishment is key. Let's look at those areas I mentioned earlier: installation, configuration, diagnostics. There's very little tools available in that area, so good opportunities there. And lastly, extend. So here, looking at more automation, more integration, more user interface choices. But who is this for? I think it's good to step back and look that there's actually three different groups. There's the homeowner, the end user, you and I playing with stuff in our living rooms or our homes. But there's also device manufacturers. Now, I'm not going to talk much about this here, but there are a lot of developers that make a good career of writing software for OEM companies. If you look at a lot of the products on the shelf in Best Buys or Targets or even online at Amazon, they're not made in the US, and some of them aren't designed in the US. And a lot of product designers have great ideas for these gadgets, but they're not software people. In fact, they get all the way into pilot phase and they go, oh crap, we got to write some software to use this thing. So they throw out an app and it's not very good, it's hard to use, it's barely minimal. So there's a lot of opportunity in the smart home space to build better manufacturer apps, not just as contractors, but sometimes perhaps as indies. There are certain genre of apps that all use similar software. So there's a lot of opportunity there. It's not visible, it's not out there, but a lot of, I think, potential there. One thing to keep in mind is HomeKit is a least common denominator system. The profile for light or dimmer or an air conditioner is the common features that Apple, with some industry input, has determined is the least common denominator they will support. A lot of products have some innovative additional capability. You cannot get to that capability in HomeKit. You have to use the manufacturer app. So HomeKit and the Home app from Apple does not obsolete manufacturers having their own apps. Examples are power devices. You may have devices that measure the usage, the wattage, the amperage. You have air monitoring devices that measure CO2s and volatile organics. And a lot of that information is not available in the Home app or very limited. In the case of security cameras, you want to do searching of video footage, you want to do archiving of video. None of that is currently available in HomeKit. So again, when I was saying earlier, embellish and extend, that's what I'm referring to. Now the third area, of which is my favorite, is the installer integrator. So again, these are tools that users might use and more technical customers may like, but they cater to the needs of the installer integrator trying to build these larger systems and deploy them across different environments. So what we have today is the Apple Home app. But we also have some third-party apps. Again, this is the Home app that gives you more information, and these are a few other user interfaces. I just pulled a few off the App Store. I didn't mark down their names because they're not memorable. They come and go. The common element here is, where's the creativity? They're just recreating a different visual representation of device. Push the device, it goes on or off, or you see some options like dimming. The metaphor hasn't changed. There isn't a different view. There isn't a thinking outside the box. So I wouldn't encourage anyone here to build yet another one of these apps that sells for 99 cents or free with hopefully some in-app upgrades. So I want to highlight one developer that I came across that's doing some interesting things in the App Store. And first of all, he did an app called HomeCam. It's $4.99. And it provides enhanced functionality for IP cameras. Now, I'm a little nervous here, so I didn't do any live video or any live demos, but what he's done in his app is give you live video feed of multiple cameras. In the stock Home app from Apple, you get a snapshot of the video when you call up a camera. Then you have to push in 3D, touch, or whatever, and then you get a live feed. He's created an at-a-glance look. So especially on on an iPad or Apple TV, you get a bird's eye view. So when you think of the classic line in the movie, in an action movie where the security guard is asleep in front of the big array of TVs and the crooks are sneaking in, he's supposed to see that. This is what becomes feasible. So now a $20,000 security system, only because it has that display capability, is under attack. You can deploy HomeKit cameras, this app, and actually encroach on some of those larger proprietary systems. And he went a little bit further, and again, this is an interesting example. This is the Apple TV version, and in addition to rotating images of the different cameras, and he hasn't done the split screen yet, so I hope he does that, he identifies what other devices are in that room and gives you access to them with buttons on the bottom. So in this particular view, there may be an air quality monitor or a thermostat. So now this is a task-driven user interface. You're looking at a certain room. What are the objects in that room? What are the attributes at a glance of those objects? And interactive control over those attributes. Now again, most of us don't turn on our Apple TV and watch the nursery for 8 hours. But bear in mind that a high-def TV is now $400, $500 at your big box store. So this is your conference room status board. This is your home security station. This is your guard station. So there's a lot of applications. Throw an Apple TV box for a couple $100, throw a big screen TV, and you have an alternate interface for a vertical market system. And then lastly, in more of the installer or the utility phase, he did an app called HomePass. This is a very simple objective to keep track of the codes. Every HomeKit device has a code you use to set it up. This app is just really a specialized database to easily track the activation codes, and I believe he's added OCR, so it actually does something more useful than just a fancy notepad list of your codes. You can scan the code and it will put it into the database. So this bridges two segments. This is an end user tool, a convenience, but it also is an installer tool. You can imagine as we go to different homes, they have different they have 30, 40, 50 devices. We may need to reset HomeKit. I hope not, but sometimes you do, and re-enter 50 codes. It's convenient to have a reference for that. And lastly, purely a diagnostic, but again, probably suitable for both end user or installer. This is a really interesting tool. It's a Bluetooth signal strength meter. Now, there are other Bluetooth tools out there, but this is mapped back into HomeKit, so it does a lookup in the HomeKit database and tells you the names of your devices using their HomeKit names. So if you're trying to find out why a door or window sensor is too far away or can't respond, you get a nice, easy, walk around with your iPhone and measure the signal strength, the RF strength of the Bluetooth. So very useful tool in the diagnostic category. And lastly, I found this little gem and actually ignored it until recently. This is a home theater calibration tool. It's available both directly on the Apple TV or on your iPhone, and it plays calibrated tones through different speakers in especially a 5.1 surround sound setup, so you can measure and set speaker volumes. Now, most amplifier receivers come with an automatic utility. I mean, if you've used Sonos, they have a little app also on your phone. You walk around like this and measures a tone and calibrates the speakers. But as you get into higher end home theaters, this is a very important tool. And today, the only tools that are available for this require PC laptops and expensive microphones to do the calibration. So what I'm pitching or proposing is to look at these vertical opportunities. If you want to develop apps or application solutions, look at improving the UI, because with iOS applications, you have a lot of toolbox available, a lot of capability. Look at task-specific domains. Look at performing something and then how to do it, not just buttons that turn lights on or off. And again, optimized versus general purpose. Some of these apps are small. I mean, most of the apps I presented were pretty easy to build, but they're selling for $5 or $10 or $15, not $1. So there's really a price reward there. And most importantly, as developers, independents, making a living, you guys are good, hopefully. I hope you're all good. You're the A team, right? So a lot of apps, unfortunately, are not. If you look, who loves their banking app from their bank? There's a lot of industry apps, as you get further away from Google, Facebook, Amazon, and into more vertical markets, you get into really bad software. Old software, bad software, ported to an iPhone, but not native to the iPhone. So there's a lot of opportunity to work on these, what it seemed to be less sexy areas, but bring a lot of that A-team innovation. So again, in the advanced tools area, looking at communication and protocol analysis, helping the networking side, getting devices talking to each other and identifying what went wrong, logs and diagnostics. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to look through an Apple console log on Mac or pulled the log out of your iPhone. It's pretty cryptic. Now maybe there's some useful data there, maybe a great parsing tool that will extract the HomeKit information and present that in a way that's usable. Just thinking out loud, but there needs to be some logging, and Apple doesn't want to do it. Every other system, the larger systems, have extensive logging, easy troubleshooting. When I can go into a home and I can see, I asked the light to turn on, and the system says, didn't hear you, or the system says, turn on the light, and the dimmer says, got the command to go to 50%, and the light didn't dim, I have a lot better idea of where the problem is in the light not dimming. Remote access, there's still a lot of room for improvement there. Right now, Apple has hubless hub in HomeKit. They don't like to use the hub word, but really it's a hub-based system. You have to have an Apple TV. Hope your kid didn't crash the latest game on his Xbox and reboot the TV, and then your house goes down at the same time. And another big area, it's not sexy, but it's really crucial, and Apple paid attention to it this week, is alerts and notifications. In the smart home arena, we're going to be seeing hundreds of thousands or millions of devices, and each device can generate status and alerts. We don't need more alerts. We need really natural language, artificial intelligence. Simple things at first. If your router or your Wi-Fi in your house goes down, you don't really need alert from all 50 light switches telling you that they're down, because until the internet comes back up, they're down. Similarly, there are a hierarchy of devices, so intelligence and processing alerts. If I have a client and their house is going down, if their internet is down, I probably want to know. If their TV automation system isn't working but they're away on vacation, I probably don't care, or I'm not going to send a guy over there right away. So parsing alerts, adding some natural language, adding some artificial intelligence to reduce the information or extract the valuable information. I'll give you another example. With security cameras, the great demo is to pull up the little camera and, oh look, I can see the baby, I can see the doggy. But when you look at a house that has 24 security cameras, one at each corner of the building, one in the front yard, backyard, indoors, outdoors, nobody wants to look at the camera. I don't ever want to see video footage. I want to be told when something important happened. Well, right now I can be told when there was motion detected. Nest does that, a few others do that. But that's not useful. I don't want to know when a car went by. I want to know when something important happened. I want to know when there's a nefarious person jimmying the lock at the front door. That's an alert I want. When the neighborhood kids are TPing the yard during Halloween, that's an alert I want. So there's a lot of room for natural language, artificial intelligence, machine learning, a lot of really heavy algorithmic processing to take something very simple and keep it simple. And we haven't seen much of that yet in the smart home arena. That does imply server-side solutions, and they're not bad to have things in the cloud. HomeKit is local, and there's advantages to that, but there are advantages to providing some back-end capabilities, because you can bring in AI and machine learning, and you have the horsepower to do it. You can spin up instances of virtual machines. You can load balance. There's a lot you can do there, and of course, either in Apple's ecosystem for cloud or in other ecosystems. And a lot of those guys are here today in the hallway. Cloud-to-cloud integrations is somewhat of a dirty word, but it's also useful. You don't want everything to go to the cloud and back for basic operations, but for some bigger integrations or longer-term integrations, that's very helpful. Advanced automation, again, seeing more capability there. So just a couple quick productivity tool ideas. This is an application on the Mac. It's for Wi-Fi hotspots. You walk around with your laptop, it maps out the Wi-Fi. It tells you what's good or what's bad. And this is another design tool. This is actually a very successful tool. It's an augmented reality tool on your iPhone and your iPad that builds a floor plan 14 million downloads, a great business model. They charge when you export the data, not when you use it. So using this, you build a floor plan, and you can bring the floor plan back in to your analysis tools to do the analysis. Another area is traditional layout, design, drawing, CAD drafting. We do a lot of work where we have to lay out wiring diagrams, lighting diagrams, equipment layout, etc. I mean, today, unfortunately, this software is $3,000, and it only runs on a PC. And a monthly subscription on top of the purchase price is $100 a month just for ongoing maintenance and updates. So if you want to aim high, look at some of these market applications. Now, I'm not saying go replicate this software in a Mac environment, but there are pieces of this that can be done in a smaller, more friendlier form, just the interactive wiring or some other things like that. So we're just about out of time, and just wanted to touch on one brief thing, which is thinking differently. This is the problem. We have too many remote controls. The natural solution is, oh, there's an app for that. Okay, there's an app, there's an app, there's another app, there's another app. Same problem, cognitive overload. We haven't fixed the problem. Now there's the way people are fixing the problem themselves, because they haven't found a good solution. The grandpa remote. This works. So really, we need to think different. We need to remember to keep it simple. HomeKit is nice, but it's not the user interface that our customers, my customers, want as the only solution. They want other things with it. So I guess we can have a few questions. Do we have time for a few questions? Or
Absolutely. Let's, oops, right in front of the camera. Let's try this.
So to play devil's advocate, given the limitations you're describing, for Apple's approach and how it doesn't line up to, multi-user stuff, the need for logging and so on, I kind of ask, do you really feel like that ecosystem in and of itself is well enough designed and extensible enough to really make sense? If one considers developing for it, I just find myself wondering that.
Well, the short answer is there's nothing else. We have the big $50,000 systems, or we have only two viable options, HomeKit or Samsung SmartThings. And the Samsung SmartThings makes HomeKit look like, God's gift to heaven. So it's a reality. Customers are buying all these products at Best Buy. They want them hooked together. So we have to deal with it, and the good news is there's nothing that goes between that and the big guys. So you may not get there, but I've worked on systems where we get 70, 80% of what those big systems do for half the price or a third the price. And so I'm saying be realistic. You don't have to be perfect, but you start solving some of these problems, there'll be a lot of acceptance.
Great talk, by the way.
Thank you.
So my question is along the lines of, you talk about like the gap between your your HomeKits and your bigger players. I've messed around with a couple of what I would think were like the intermediary, like your Mikasa Verdes, things that are more in control, where you can get like a Z-Wave USB stick and then buy the. So how would you compare using? Because when HomeKit was first announced, I myself asked the question, well, why would I use HomeKit when I could just get these USB sticks, a couple of a pairing here and there, and you get an interface that you can control those things. So where does it fall in that sense? Where does HomeKit fall with relation to those systems?
It really deals with market. I mean, I wear both hats. As a hobbyist, hacker, software guy, I play with all those hubs, all those products, and they're great and they work. But if you look at the bigger market, they're not going to be used by every average homeowner, your grandma, your grandpa. So the mass market, they're niche products. They're good products. They do a lot more. But the mass market product is really just HomeKit. There's nothing else in the Apple ecosystem. And if you look at the dollars, the revenue, the market share, and some of those products are open source, some of them are open architecture, some aren't. They're good products, and I would be glad to tell you my favorites and ones I've tried recently, but they're not for the business commercial or even end user side. You could use it, but your grandmother couldn't.
One more question?
Oh, yes, could I ask about your thoughts on like smart TVs and stoves and all these devices that you go to Best Buy and they're trying to make you purchase it? Are they useful or long-term integration? What's your thoughts on those guys?
Well, there's two aspects of those devices. There's what's really going to happen, and then there's where all the sex and excitement is trying to be. What's really going to happen is service, support, maintenance, and reliability. Every appliance will be hooked into the Internet of Things, especially more so than home networking, to report back and do proactive maintenance. Your dishwasher will tell Sears Central or Whirlpool that the pump is burning out and replace it before it's needed. So that side of it is happening, but they can't sell that. You're not going to pay extra money to have your appliance tell you it's breaking and to call the repairman. So they're trying to find in the industry the excitement. And I'd say so far the biggest excitement is in the kitchen. A lot of there's smart kitchen products. There are some industry conferences on that because cooking, the home chef, automating cooking, helping you cook, there the technology has value and you're willing to buy it and pay for it. Sous vide cookers that are automated, the Juno ovens. So I think more in the smart kitchen initially, but ultimately it's just going to be every appliance will be plugged in. It's just be a matter of fact.
I think that might be all we have time for.
Okay, thank you.
This was fascinating. Thank you very much.